are Partnership for Children, and we produce the Skills for Life programs, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. We are based in the UK. We're a very small team, but we could be anywhere in the world. We work with partner agencies all around the world, which means we can reach thousands of children. We're like the small hub of a big wheel. And you can see here our sort of strapline, good mental health for children for life. And this has a double meaning. We want to teach children skills that they will use in their lives now and hope that these skills will last them for the rest of their lives. And our organisation was actually formed out of a global suicide prevention agency called Befrienders International, who decided to work with educational psychologists and academics to develop programs that give children skills to cope with difficult situations and be better equipped to deal with difficulties as teenagers and adults. And that's how our Zippy's Friends program was born over 20 years ago now. And we work in partnership with many countries around the world, over 20 countries. And that means we have now reached over 2 million children with our programs. And these are the countries that are currently running our programs. And I'm very excited to see that we have some colleagues joining us from those organizations today. So these are our Skills for Life programs, and these programs teach children how to choose positive coping strategies to deal with everyday difficulties and develop resilient skills. And our first three programs, Zippy's Friends, Apple's Friends, and Passport, are story-based and based on coping theory and include modules on feelings, communication, friendship, conflict, change and loss, and moving forward. And children develop their own positive coping strategies to deal with problems through engaging activities such as listening to stories, discussion, games, role play, and drawing. I'm going to talk about Spark Resilience later in the session and how that links with self-efficacy. So I won't talk too much about that now. That is our latest program of these main programs. Our Zippy's Friends for Children with Special Needs program was developed in 2013 in collaboration with special schools, with support from the National Association of Independent Schools and Non-Maintained Special Schools. And that's also being used to support children and young people in schools in the UK and around the world. And finally, thanks to a generous grant from Kavli Trust, we have our early years personal, social, emotional development program. And this is currently piloting in the UK, which is very exciting. And who do we work with at Partnership for Children? These are just a selection of the organisations and people that we work with. We've trained over 200 UK schools, and that is a lot of my work. We work with alternative provisions, young carers services around the UK and across the world to deliver our programmes. So we are absolutely thrilled at Partnership for Children to have had the opportunity to work in partnership with Professor Clare Wood and her team from Nottingham Trent University on the development of activities to boost children's and young people's self-efficacy and resilience. And the development of the activities was inspired by our Spark Resilience programme, which I'm going to share more about later in today's webinar. But before I just hand over to Claire for us to hear more about her work and the development of the activities, I'm going to put up a very short anonymous poll, and I'd like you to share your answer. And this is just for us to get an idea of your knowledge of self-efficacy. So it's just one question, and as I say, it is anonymous, but if everyone could share their thoughts on their knowledge of self-efficacy and resilience and building that in children and young people, that would be fab. Okay, brilliant. I think most people have filled out the poll now, so I'm just going to share that so we can just see where we are. And, you know, we're all here from different backgrounds today, and we've all got different levels of knowledge. So, yeah, we're all at different starting points, and that's why we're here today, to learn about boosting self-efficacy and resilience. So thank you for sharing your answers there. And we're going to do another poll like that at the end. So I'm going to hand over now. I'm thrilled to be handing over to Professor Clare Wood to hear more about her research, the team's research, and the self-efficacy activities. So I'm just going to stop sharing, Claire, so that you can share your screen.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm just fiddling around in the background as you do so that you can get to see my slides. Hopefully you can see my slide deck. Is that showing okay, Liz?
Yep, that's brilliant, Claire. You're not on camera at the moment, so
yeah, I'll
thought that
just
brilliant.
sort that out. There we go. So, hello everybody. You're very. I'm so happy to meet you all, albeit virtually, and to have this opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the background to this work, where the ideas came from, and what we're trying to do with the booklet. Really. So, let me just hang on a second. There we go. Right. So what I'm going to do very, very briefly before handing back to Liz is just introduce you to the concept of self-efficacy, explain a little bit about why it's so important for children and young people, and tell you very briefly about a piece of research that we did that flagged for us just how important self-efficacy is, and also some challenges that we currently face in relation to it. And as ever, there's one thing identifying that we've got a challenge is another thing to say, what can we do about it? So the good news is there are lots of positive things that we can do to help boost and support children and young people's self-efficacy. So that's where the booklet comes in. But what I'll do is I'll talk through a little bit about the broad principles, about how we can go about influencing it, and talk you through a few example activities from the booklet. So what is this thing we call self-efficacy? It's not quite the same as self-esteem. You sometimes people kind of conflate the two, but self-efficacy is something quite specific. It refers to someone's belief in their own ability to either accomplish tasks or to achieve goals that they set for themselves in particular areas of their life. So it's kind of linked to confidence, but it is this at its heart, it has this idea that we can be successful at things that we want to achieve for ourselves. Why is it important? Well, we know from lots of research that individuals who have got good levels of self-efficacy are much more likely to be happy to set themselves challenging goals. They're more likely to really try hard at the things that they engage with. They're also more likely to be the sort of young people who are going to persevere when things start to get a little bit tricky. We also know that children who have got higher self-efficacy also tend to be the children who have got better social skills, they've got better problem-solving skills, and they also tend to have better academic outcomes than children who struggle with self-efficacy. So all of this had its roots with a project that I originally started doing with Hachette Learning. So a long time ago, pre-pandemic, we started to work together on developing this thing called the Wellbeing and Attitudes to Learning Survey and Strategies. And the idea was that we wanted to design something that on one level was a very simple, child-friendly survey that teachers could use with their students to check in on them and check in on their well-being while they were at school. And this was slightly rooted in this sense that schools were expected to have a little bit more responsibility for this sort of thing, but it was also rooted in more in sort of a wider interest, which is children spend so much of their time at school. They spend so much of their time at school, but in terms of well-being, this idea of what do we mean when we talk about children's well-being, that means different things to different people. But what we didn't really understand is what it looked like in a school context or in an educational context. So when we started to do a little bit of digging, we developed some ideas, we tried them out, and what we found through some background work was that, broadly speaking, for children and young people when they're very young, and particularly when they're starting to go to school or starting to engage with learning, you can think of well-being as having four main aspects. One is positivity, so having good self-esteem, an optimistic point of view, feeling satisfied with being at school or wherever they're, feeling that they belong there, and things like how they feel in their school and classroom environments. Motivation was also a separate dimension. So this was the idea that how much did children value what they were being asked to do? How much were they being motivated by external things like rewards? And how much they were getting support for their learning from other people. Another big part of this this idea of self-efficacy. Of that, we looked at three main areas. One was emotional self-efficacy. So this was the sense in which children felt that they were successful at managing their own emotions and their emotional reactions to situations. Um, Interpersonal self-efficacy referred to situations where they were needing to manage relationships and have achieved successful outcomes in relation to the way they worked with other people, whether that was children or adults. And then the final part was also looking at academic self-efficacy, so the extent to which they felt that they could be successful at learning tasks that they might set themselves, or learning goals that they might set themselves. And then all out on its own was this idea of resilience and persistence being a separate concept. So these were these four areas. We developed this very simple survey, and then what happened was that would profile children, and then you could look up support strategies to say, okay, I'm a little bit worried about this child or this group of children, or about the setting more generally. What sort of strategies could I put in place to help support these things? So that was the origin of all of this. And so for those of you who are interested in this sort of thing, this is a little diagram of how all those things connect to each other. So the main thing that I want to draw your attention to in this diagram is the fact that self-efficacy is linked to children's motivation, it's linked to their resilience, and it's linked to their positivity in important ways. So we developed this around about 2018, and we launched it in the autumn of 2019. And I don't know if any of you remember, but in 2020, something fairly big happened. So obviously, pandemic happened. Children's lives were ruptured in really important ways. But what happened was we had this tool that was out being used. And so we were able to capture a little bit of a snapshot in real time of what was happening right at the height of all of the school closures. And this was in particular children in Key Stage 2. And also what happened 1 year later. So it's kind of post the school closure, but still with kind of the outflow of the pandemic very much in children's minds. So what we found was this, and I should say this work was supported by the Nuffield Foundation, which we're incredibly grateful for. So if you look at the 4 dimensions, what happens on the tool is children are given a red, amber, green rating depending on their responses to each different dimensions and so on. And this is the percentage of children who had what we deem to be a satisfactory level of either motivation to learn, positivity, self-efficacy, or resilience based on their responses to the survey at the point at which we first developed the survey, and then during the 2 subsequent time periods. And what you'll notice straight away was even before the pandemic, children's sense of self-efficacy was already lower than the other 3 dimensions. And what happened was during the pandemic and subsequently, it dropped further. Now that was true across all the dimensions, but the fact that we had this situation where there was such a low percentage of children reporting sort of satisfactory or unproblematic levels of self-efficacy was a real standout observation for us, and it was a real cause for concern. And you also notice that resilience also, perhaps unsurprisingly, took a hit. And I should say on resilience, obviously resilience is a complicated construct, and so all that we were doing in that survey was trying to tap kind of, if you like, the child aspect of that very, very complicated set of interdependent factors that contribute to whether or not a child is able to kind of bounce back from a situation. So at this point, we reached out to Partnership for Children and said, you know, we need to start to get the message out. We need to start to let people know that we've got a generation of children and young people who don't think they can. And that's really quite concerning. It's concerning for educators, but it's concerning for parents. I'm a parent of a young daughter. It's concerning for all of us who have contact with children and young people, and it's worth being aware that this is what happens. So it's on us really to see what we can do to help support children and young people and see what we can do to positively influence it. Now, for this is the science bit, if you like. If we look at the underlying theory, so this is the theory of Bandura, who said that there's essentially 4 different ways that we can influence a person's sense of self-efficacy. One is by creating what's termed mastery experiences. So these are opportunities for children and young people to experience success, so to develop a sense of competence, to attempt to do something and find that they're able to do it. So those mastery experiences build an individual's sense that they can be successful when they set themselves goals. Another important source of influence is through role models, so what's termed vicarious experiences. So this is where children and young people look at other people who are in some way like them. So perhaps they have similar interests, or they're a similar age, or they've got a similar background to them, but there's something about someone else that they identify with. But they look at that other person and they see that other person trying to do things that they'd quite like to do, but also experiencing success. And they get kind of a vicarious boost of self-confidence from seeing people like them succeeding. A third important source of self-efficacy is what's termed social persuasion, what we might think of more generally as positive encouragement. So providing lots and lots of positive feedback to children and young people around the sort of person they are, what's important about them, what's valuable about them, what we see when we look at them, and sort of being able to reflect that back at them in a really positive way. And then the fourth area is more around emotional or physical reframing. So if I give you an example of this, so preparing for this session today, it doesn't matter how many times I do it, you always get a little bit of a sense of nervousness. You get a little bit of a heightened physical response to doing something for the first time, particularly with a new group of people that I've never had the pleasure of talking to before. You don't know how it's going to go. And in emotional physical reframing, what you do is you take that physical response and also perhaps some of that personal self-talk where you're thinking, oh, my heart's beating faster. This is me becoming anxious. This is me being worried. This is me sensing that I'm being unsuccessful, or I've got potential to be unsuccessful, and reframing that much more positively. So saying, no, do you know what? That heightened heartbeat, that is a physical response that is excitement because you're taking on something new for the first time. And that's because you care about how successful you're going to be, and all of that is a good thing because you can take it as a positive indicator that you're invested in what you're trying to do. So really engaging in that kind of a positive reframing of what might be initially experienced as quite frightening emotional reactions is an incredibly important sense of self-efficacy. So you see those 4 ideas reflected in some of the activities in the booklet that you're going to receive after today's session. So, and we've kind of broadly grouped the activities around, or we recommend them for different sort of age bands. But to be honest, you know the children and young people that you envisaging working with, and so you select the ones that you think are going to connect with them most readily. The age groups are just kind of indicative, really. So, for example, there is one that we've called Bringing Drawings to Life. And this is the idea that you might sit down with the child and say, let's draw a picture together. Why don't you draw me a picture of something that you really like, or perhaps something that you think that we could have a go at making, or you wish that you could make. And they might draw you a picture of a monster, or they might draw you a picture of a house, or a picture of a model car, or whatever it might be. And then you say, do you think we can make that together? What do you think? Shall we get some bits together and let's see if we can have a go at actually making a model of that? And the idea is that you allow the young person to really have a lot of hands-on control of that. So this isn't about you demonstrating and them following, it's about them leading and you very much being in a supportive role. So where they've got something that requires a little bit more kind of fine motor skill or something. You supporting what they're doing, but then having control of it. Because what you want to achieve through this activity is a mastery experience. You want to show them, well, that was quite the thing. I bet you didn't think today you'd be making a monster, but look at what you've made. How fantastic is that? And they can make it out of anything, it doesn't really matter. But the point is to have that moment of reflection around the activity where you are reflecting on the fact that they worked out the best place to start, how to problem solve through that activity, what the best materials might be to make the thing out of, and so on. But also, importantly, noting that they pulled it off, they managed to make the thing. So that's one example of how you can give even a very young child mastery experience. And with that idea, I'm sure that you can think of lots and lots of other similar type activities where the principle is the same. So the principle is essentially that idea of giving success. And as you'll see in the booklet, we have a little evidence base pull out where we just have got a little reminder of where we got the idea for that activity from. So I was really fortunate to have a little team of students here at Nottingham Trent University who worked with me to identify different strategies and different things that have actually been tried in research in the past. And we identified the ones that we felt that were most successful and what sort of age groups they'd been used with. And from that background work, we developed these activities. So we also have here another activity. This is for slightly older children, and this is simply called the role model. And the idea is that you invite the children to think of someone that they admire, and that could be a family member, that could be a famous person, it could be a historical person, just someone that they think. And you go through a conversation with them where you talk to them about why that person is so special. So what's so important, and you might take notes for them, or they might decide to write down a few notes for themselves, depending on how old they are. But the idea is you think, what are the qualities of that person? What sort of things have they done that have been particularly inspirational? What sort of things have they achieved? And then having done that, the idea is that, again, you can lead the young person through a reflection around thinking about the different ways in which that person might be similar to them in some way, in ways that perhaps they haven't fully appreciated before. And that might involve, particularly with older children, doing a little bit more background research into who that person is and what their background is and what was important to them. And so the idea is that you get them to think about the qualities that they associate with successful people and people they look up to, and then kind of hold the mirror up and say, but that's you. That's something that you've got in you as well. An example of social persuasion is this activity, which is the sweet jar. And this one has got a very special place in my heart because this is one that I've actually used myself with my own daughter. So, for example, this is where you might sit down and you start off by finding a container. So it might be an old jam jar or whatever it might be. And the idea is this a little bit easier if you get a friend involved? Again, particularly depending on the age of the young person. So you get them to sit down and think about each other, and you invite the child's friends to say, I want you to sit down and write on lots and lots of little pieces of paper all the different things that you like about your friends. So what do you think of when you think of them? And write down lots and lots of positive statements. That might be things like, you're really clever at maths, or you really like reading, or you're always kind, you always look out for other people, and so on. So all these little positive affirmations effectively. And again, at the same time, the child that you're working with can be doing that about their friend too. So they're building sweet jars for each other. And then you can start to encourage them to say, well, what about things about yourself? Are there any things that you would say are also true about you? And encourage them to put a few notes for themselves in their own jar. But that's not strictly necessary. If you've got a very shy or very self-conscious child, that's not strictly necessary. But the reason we call it the sweetie jar is because, again, you can twist the papers and make them look like little sweets, but you drop them in. And the idea is that either every day or every morning, or if you're feeling a bit low, you can pull one of those out of the jar and read it. And it's just a really important reminder that they are loved. It's an important reminder. It's a really useful mechanism for encouraging them to reflect positively on themselves and to promote positive self-talk and to build a bit of confidence, because again, they start to see each other through um, other people's eyes. But it's also that idea of really starting to reinforce a lot of positive self-talk and a positive self-image. So the resource booklet has got 10 of these different activities, as you've seen. And I'm sure that once you've seen the ones that we've come up with, there will be lots of other ones that you can come up with yourself that, these will act as sort of inspiration for. But at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand back to Liz so that she can pick up the conversation from here.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Claire. It's so fascinating to hear about the research, everything that's gone into your work, and the lovely activities that you and the team have developed, and a bit more about those. And as I've already mentioned at the beginning, these wonderful activities were developed through Claire and her team's research, and they took inspiration from the Spark Resilience program. So I'm going to share a bit more now about Spark Resilience. And as I talk about Spark Resilience, I'm sure having heard Claire speak about the research and all the activities and all of the work that has gone into those, I'm sure you'll see lots of similarities with the Spark program and the connections as I go through. Um, so our Spark Resilience program was developed in 2008 and 2009 in response to the rising rates of depression and anxiety in children and young people around the world, which has only sadly continued to increase since then and has even doubled in some countries. And as Claire mentioned, due to the pandemic, that sadly only added to that, really. And we can define a resilient person really as someone who is resistant to stress. They can bounce back from difficult situations. As someone said in a training session recently, they've got that bounce back ability. They can adapt successfully when challenges come up. And of course, they'll have built up their self-efficacy as well, because as Claire explained with her really useful diagram there, it's all really interlinked and connected with self-efficacy and resilience. And resilient children are likely to have high expectations, a meaning in life, goals, personal agency, and interpersonal skills. And while some children are born with more of this capacity than others, resilient skills can be learned, and we hope that children will develop them through this program, our Spark Resilience program. And here's just some of the reasons why Spark, why now? And as I mentioned, we want children to develop resilience, healthy thinking skills that will support them through the rest of their lives. And also, this program can help children to cope with transitions between primary and secondary schools, improve their self-efficacy and resilience. And again, the Spark Resilience program is aimed originally at 10 to 12-year-olds, but has been used with a range of ages in different countries and the UK. And it's quite a short program of only 11 sessions, and it can be used as a whole class or small groups. And the theory behind Spark Resilience, Spark is really built on three fields of study. It was built by Ilona Boniwell, who's a eminent sort of positive psychologist. And the fields that inform Spark Resilience are firstly cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which you may be familiar with as an effective treatment for stress, anxiety, and depression. And the principle behind this is really that since behaviors and feelings are influenced by cognitive processes, changing the way that we think can lead to changes in behavior and feelings. And we've seen a lot of that in the activities as well. And essentially, this involves identifying habitual thought patterns and challenging unhelpful ways of thinking, reframing our thoughts in more positive ways. And in Spark Resilience, this is made more concrete for children by what we call the parrots of perception, which I'll show you in a moment. The second field is positive psychology, the science of happiness, well-being, and flourishing, drawing on what is strong rather than dealing with what is wrong. It encourages optimistic and positive thinking by helping us to identify our character strengths and build on them, to recognize positive social connections and support, to identify what we're good at and what we enjoy doing. Again, a lot of similarities with Claire's work and research. And Thirdly, mindfulness. And again, I'm sure you're very familiar with mindfulness. It's been practiced across the world, and it's got certainly more popular in the last few years. And this has been defined as paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and non judgmentally. And it's been found to be a very positive strategy for dealing with our emotions, increasing that cognitive flexibility, managing pain, and boosting psychological and physical well being. And Spark delivers these concepts through a combination of three techniques. We've got mindfulness activities, resilience muscle activities, and the Spark process. And it's a program that is based in research and science, but it's designed to be very practical and fun for children. And by creating a supportive space that encourages exploration and building resilience, um, teachers are also boosting children's self efficacy. So, I'm going to talk very briefly through these different parts of Spark Resilience. So, firstly, we have our mindfulness activities, and each Spark session starts with either a mindfulness exercise for which we provide the recordings or a resilience gym exercise where students think and discuss their resilience muscles. I have, I am, I can, and I like. And just going back to the mindfulness activities quickly, these help children to bring attention and awareness to themselves through simple exercises, including breathing or visualization. And many studies have shown the benefits of mindfulness. And going back to the resilience muscles, throughout the Spark program, children learn about the resilience muscles and set goals for making them stronger. And this comes from positive psychology. And students create their own resilience portfolio where they identify their strengths and supports, and they boost their resilience muscles using the resilience gym. And then the next concept of Spark is the Spark Resilience process, which helps students to analyze difficult situations using the Spark acronym, which comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. And we're looking at examining the situation, what happened. P stands for perception, how we see a situation. A is for our autopilot, the feeling that is triggered by the way we see a situation. R is our reaction, what we do in response to a situation. And K is knowledge, what we learn or what we think we know as a result of the outcome of the situation. And using this simple method, children and young people can think about what happens at each stage of their thinking and how they can change this to produce better outcomes. And I've already mentioned our parrots of perception, and let's have a look at the negative ones. And these little metaphorical creatures sit on our shoulders and tell us how to think. And here's our positive parrots. So in the Spark sessions, children learn to recognize when the different parrots are speaking and how to question the parrot's unhelpful messages and reframe their thoughts. And this again comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. But how do we know that the Spark program and these techniques work? Well, evaluations which were conducted at two schools in Newham in London with 438 children using a two-cohort treatment control design and validated scales showed that Spark decreased depression, increased resilience, increased self-esteem, increased positive emotion, and increased positive functioning. And if you scan the QR code on that slide there, you can see a bit more about a bit of a summary of the evidence for Spark resilience. And then just very briefly, we've created program resources to make delivering Spark as easy as possible. The teacher's manual has lots of useful information about how to deliver the program. We've got the mindfulness recordings, as I've mentioned. We've got student workbooks that contain reading and exercises for students to complete. We also provide slides for each session, which contain the mindfulness recordings, and there is also a parents leaflet as well, so share with parents about the program. And here's just a quick look at some of the resources that come with the program. And each session has an easy to use lesson plan with a list of resources, timings, activities, and each session has a similar structure of an introductory activity followed by teacher presentations and activities for whole classes, small groups, or individuals. So that's a bit of an overview of the Spark Resilience program. So if you're looking to develop children and young people's resilience further within a sort of school or classroom setting, then that is the Spark Resilience program overview for you. And we've got some training coming up in May. So again, there's a QR code if you'd like to sign up for the training, and that's for UK and English speaking international schools. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, our programs are run in a wide variety of countries and cultures across the globe. We don't provide our programs to individual schools overseas. We sign a license agreement with a partner agency. I'm very excited to have some of you with us here today. And our partner organisations range widely in size and character, for large NGOs to small voluntary agencies, academic institutions. Some are regional, some are national. So if you're interested in becoming a licensed partner, we will share links to further information in our follow-up email. And as I mentioned in the chat earlier, we will share links to everything that we've covered in the webinar today, in the follow-up email, or the resources and things like that. And before we sort of close out the webinar and we have our questions, I just wanted to mention a couple of other Partnership for Children resources that are coming up, other webinars that are coming up as well. So we have some new webinar series to support staff and practitioners working with children and young people. And our first one in April will explore the Lundy model of child participation and how this framework can be used to ensure children's voices are heard, respected, and integrated into our programs. And again, I'll share the link in a follow-up. And of course, you've joined us today for the launch of the very wonderful self-efficacy activities, and I will share a link to those. We will share a link to those, the full booklet of those, in the follow-up email from the webinar. I'm very excited to hear about how you've used those, but we also do have a selection of other free wellbeing activities on our website, and again, there's a QR code to access those. Various themes from our programs. We have some young carers activities, we have early years activities, so do check those out as well, and those are all absolutely completely free, so do feel free to download and use those, as well as the self-efficacy activities, which we're very excited about. And if you'd like, and just to mention again about our programs, if you'd like any further information on any of our programs, do get in touch.